Melody says, is it absolutely necessary to receive an annulment in order to convert and be received by the church? I have paperwork to get this done, and I'm very hesitant due to past abuse. Okay. Well, it is not. It's not absolutely necessary to receive an annulment in order to come into the church. If let's say someone has a previous marriage, and they want to become a Catholic, well, if that's all there is to the situation, they can become a Catholic. It might be advisable for them to get an annulment in case they want to marry someone else in the future. It could be good to have this cleared up one way or another before you join the church, but it's not required. You can go ahead and join the church, and as long as the church will assume that your previous, since it's never looked at your previous marriage, it will assume that your previous marriage is valid and that you're still bound to that previous person. So you wouldn't be able to marry someone else. But if you're perfectly free to enter the church without getting an annulment on your previous marriage. And heck, they might look at the previous marriage and say, yeah, that looks valid. You're bound to that guy. But that's not going to stop you from coming into the Catholic Church. So you, under no circumstances is anyone absolutely required to get an annulment in order to enter the Catholic Church. It may be advised or strongly recommended in a particular case, but it's not a requirement. A variation on the situation would be, let's say you have a previous marriage and you have gone on to marry someone else civilly, or your current spouse, even if you've only been married once, your current spouse has been married to someone else in the past. Well, okay, in this situation, marriage, the legal phrase is marriage enjoys the favor of the law. What that means is every marriage is assumed to be valid, starting with the first, until it's proved not to be. And so if you've had we'll just keep it simple. If you've had a previous marriage and you're currently married to someone else, well, your first marriage enjoys the favor of the law until it's shown that it is not valid, at which point the presumption of the favor of the law shifts to your current marriage. Well, okay, in this situation, if you're leading a normal married life, but you're still bound in God's eyes to your first spouse, objectively speaking, that would be adultery. That's not to say you mean it as adultery, but from an objective point of view, if you're married to one person and you're living a normal married life with a second person, you're living in a state of objective adultery. And this is something Jesus stresses in 3 of the 4 Gospels. So the church has to take it seriously. But one option in this situation is to pursue an annulment on the first marriage, and then, if needed, have the new marriage convalidated after the annulment has been obtained. But it's actually not necessary in any strict sense to get the annulment here, because you could live as brother and sister. You could say, okay, well, I can't show that I was free to marry my current spouse, and my current spouse and I have decided to live as brother and sister unless and until such time as we find out we are free to be married. And as long as you're both okay with that, and as long as you're living that way, then you're not living in a state of sin, and so you could go ahead and join the Catholic Church without a problem. And then if at some future point you are able to pursue an annulment and show that you're free to marry this other person, or were free to marry them, then that's even better. But whether or not you've remarried, there are ways that that one could enter a church. So no, getting an annulment is not a strict requirement for becoming Catholic. But if you don't get an annulment, there may be other things that need to happen. Like, well, okay, you need to not get remarried while your previous partner's alive, or You need to live as brother and sister if you've already remarried, or you get the annulment. So there are a range of different options here. But it's still possible for anybody to become a Catholic. It's just a question of which paths do you need to follow in order to live in compliance with Christ's law and do that.
And before we go, don't forget to like, comment, share the podcast with others, and subscribe. When you subscribe, hit the bell notification so you always get notified whenever I have a new video. Thank you, and God bless you.